Hi, everyone. We're seeing lots of jockeying already as maps have been redrawn in Florida with Governor DeSantis' signature barely dry, right? And the lawsuits have followed as to who's going to run where. Debbie Wasserman Schultz indicates she's going to run again, but where? Is she going to run in the new 25th district where she doesn't live, but would have pretty high name ID? I think out of the gates, the former Boca Raton mayor, Scott Singer, on the Republican side, is a strong candidate, as is the former state representative, George Moraitis. Although Singer has some local issues that I covered very closely at the Boca Raton Tribune that will probably hurt him in a Republican primary in terms of some of the development that went on in the city of Boca. That's something, or attempted development that went on in the city of Boca. That's something we'll talk about later, I'm sure, as we get deeper into this cycle. But where would Wasserman Schultz run? There's indications Jared Moskowitz wants to run for re-election, as reported by Peter Schorsch of Florida politics, who's very close with Congressman Moskowitz. Where would he run? Would he run in the new 22nd district? I think that's where Wasserman Schultz may have to run. That is an R+10 seat in 2024. Now, it is a seat that includes Wellington, Davie, Parkland, Marco Island, Ave Maria, Immokalee. It is a seat that was designed to elect a Republican. It is also a seat where Democrats prior to 2020 were, if you look at those areas, were competitive. It would be what I would characterize as a 50-50 district in presidential years, slightly more Republican in off years, historically, if you look at those areas. But now that's kind of changing. It seems like GOP turnout tends to be higher in presidential years. The Democratic turnout, although this wasn't the case in Florida in 2022, seems to be steadier in off-year elections than they used to be. You used to count on Republicans having higher turnouts in off-year elections. And that district, in fact, is about 30% NPA or 31% NPA. So it really could go, it could swing back, potentially, although I'm not sure about that, but we'll see. So where does Moskowitz run? Where does Wasserman Schultz run? There are African Americans who are saying Wasserman Schultz should not run in the newly drawn Congressional District 20, which they say should elect an African American. But of course, we had a decision last week in the Calais case from Louisiana by the Supreme Court of the United States, which throws out African American, throws out the Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. Now, it doesn't throw out the rest of the Voting Rights Act, or weakens Section 2, I should say. Now, I have to say, I gave similar advice to a white candidate a few years ago, or someone associated with a white candidate who wanted to run in a seat that had been a majority-minority seat and had been redrawn by virtue of Governor DeSantis's forced intervention in the redistricting process in 2022, where he forced his own map, vetoed the map that the legislature had passed, which, by the way, would have created probably a 17-11 map. So we're talking about, all told, the Republicans picking up 7 seats out of DeSantis and James Utmeyer's intervention in all of this. That's the difference in the House, right? In the U.S. House. It could be the difference if the Republicans hold the House in 2026. Could be the Florida redistricting. I told this person, you know what? It's not an African-American majority seat anymore, but within the Democratic Party, you will not look very good if you challenge an African-American in that seat. So that's sort of what I would say about Wasserman Schultz also, in spite of her legacy, in spite of the fact that I think it would be a huge loss for South Florida to lose her as a congressperson. Now, what about Kathy Castor? We're hearing she might run in the 14th, which is a seat where I thought Laura Lee would run. And then Darren Soto, I think, looks poised to run for re-election. So what does this remind me of? It reminds me of 1992, because when the VRA Section 2 was first pushed on a Florida congressional map, you had a number of Democrats whose seats were being impacted by the redistricting retire. Dante Fascell was one, the legendary Dante Fascell, chairman of the House Armed Services Committee. House Foreign Relations Committee. You had Charlie Bennett retire, Charles Bennett, Congressman Charles Bennett from Jacksonville, the chairman of the Appropriations Subcommittee on Military and Armed Services. Two really powerful Congresspeople resigned because their seats had been altered in a way where their core constituencies were gone. And so Corinne Brown effectively replaced Charles Bennett in a way, but you could say Tilly Kid Fowler did. And then in the case of Dante Fascell, I don't know where you say his district went, potentially the district that Peter Deutsch won, which is now, ironically, the seat Debbie Wasserman Schultz has. Although, I mean, these districts have gone all over the place. Dante Fascell was from southern Dade County. And then you had Jim Backus, a Democrat from Orange County, forced to move to Brevard County and run in a pared down district that was much more Republican. He hung on for one cycle and retired. And realized that district was going to be very hard to keep for him and for the Democrats. And the Democrats have never won that seat back now. I guess the successor seat would be the seat that Mike Haradopoulos sits in currently. Became Dave Weldon after '94. So you've had that impact through the years with redistricting. And so this I felt might be similar. You would see a number of Democrats walk away. But maybe the different factor is here, we're at a more polarized time. The Democrats are in the minority. When those Democrats retired, I talked about in 1992, they were in the majority. And they were committee chairs, particularly Bennett and Fascell, were two of the most powerful Democrats, two of the most powerful members of Congress. So Wasserman Schultz, who is poised to be very powerful if the Democrats regain a majority. She's been in Congress now, I think, for 22 years, right? 2004, yeah. And then Moskowitz, who's never been in the majority. Am I correct in saying that? Yeah, he's never been in the majority. Or was he? Did he get elected in a special election? I'm trying to remember. I think he did. So he was in the majority briefly. But obviously, this last two terms, he's not been in the majority. So they want a taste of being back in the majority. Castor's been in and out of the majority, but I think there is a feeling from talking to people in Hillsborough County, or in Tampa specifically, they want a Tampa-based rep. They had a Tampa-based rep in Sam Gibbons from 1962 to 1996, Jim Davis from 96 until, I guess, 2006, and 2006 till now, Kathy Castor. St. Petersburg always had a resident congressperson from 1954 in Bill Kramer, through Bill Young, through who replaced Bill Young? Dave Jolly, who's now a Democrat but was a Republican at the time, and then Charlie Crist, who had been a Republican when he was statewide elected official, was a Democrat by the time he got elected to Congress, and is now running for the mayor of St. Pete. So these areas are thinking we need our resident powerhouses, and I think there's some thought about that also in Broward County, not necessarily with Jared Moskowitz, who's a relatively junior, although well-connected person, but I think in the case of Debbie Wasserman Schultz, that is almost certainly the case. So keep an eye on this space. Sorry, I'm back. I didn't finish my thought there, which is, I think what happened in 1992 is that Jacksonville and Miami, particularly southern Dade County, felt like they permanently lost some influence by Bennett and Fascell stepping down. And I think it's the same thing with Tampa now. If Kathy Castor is gone, they lose influence. She's been in the House for 20 years. If the Democrats regain a majority, that's good for the city of Tampa. There seems to be an agenda among Republicans to punish urban areas. So same thing in Broward County. There's a feeling keeping Debbie Wasserman Schultz around in some form would be smart. So that's I think among urban elected officials, even Chamber of Commerce people who lean Republican, there's a feeling now the Republicans want to punish our urban areas. Maybe we need to keep the most influential people we can in there. So that would be Wasserman Schultz, that would be Castor, that would be potentially Moskowitz. So, and from 92, these areas learned that redistricting costs those areas. Not only cost individual Congress people, long-term Congress people their seats, but costs those areas ultimately a lot of influence in Washington and a lot of things that could help those areas, those regions.